everyone. We're live here tonight for our town hall on gardening during the pandemic. And I'm just going to go ahead and get my phone set up so I can see your comments. And we'll get started. There we go. Okay. All right, there we go. We're all set now. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to give people about a minute to get on as this live feed gets started. So hope everyone's doing well. There we go. All right, we'll just give it a little bit time for everyone to join in as they're coming in. Okay, we'll get started. So hi everyone, I'm Council Member Farah Khan, and tonight we're going to be talking about gardening during the pandemic. And I've got some amazing folks with me tonight. I have Tina Spindler, who's not only a master gardener, but she's one of the founders of the, the Orange County Great Park Garden Coalition. And so I'm so thankful for her to be here. I know she has an amazing knack for gardening. And so thank you, Tina, for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me. I am so excited that so many more people are trying gardening during the pandemic. And so I'm excited to share some thoughts and answer any questions folks have.
Awesome. And also with us is Matthew Chang. Matthew is an Irvine middle schooler and a gardening advocate. And so Matthew, thank you so much. Matthew and I have been discussing a lot of gardening opportunities, not only on the city side, but also in our parks. So very happy to have you here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So we'll get started. And what I'll ask you guys to do is give us like a little brief basics of starting a garden. What does it take to start one? And you might want to do it as if you're talking to me, because for people that don't know, I don't have a green thumb. I'm not very talented when it comes to gardening. But this time around, I've actually done well. So I'm very proud of myself. And so, Tina, let's start with you. And if you could just give us some of the basics on what does it take to even start a garden?
Sure. All it takes mostly is sun. So if you can find a spot anywhere where you live that gets 6 hours of sun, you can grow vegetables. It doesn't have to be a plot in the ground. You don't have to have soil that you can dig in, because vegetables are really happy to grow in containers. So mostly find a place that has 6 hours of sun, and then choose your containers if you need containers, or the native soil where you live then needs to be dug up, or in the case of containers, you need to purchase potting soil. And I would just remind folks to be sure you get potting mix or potting soil, not the bags that are labeled garden soil, unless you actually have real soil in your garden that you're going to dig that bag of product into, because when it's labeled garden soil, it's meant to go into your garden soil. It's not meant to go in a pot. So you have to, have soil, the 6 hours of sun, and then you have to choose what veggies you're going to plant. And the most important thing there is to make sure you're choosing the things that want to grow this time of year, which we can talk about a little bit more later. And of course, you need to have access to water and be sure that it's close and convenient, either in the form of sprinklers or a hose that you're going to hand water. And then after that, you'll have to keep an eye out for perhaps some pests, which we can also discuss a little bit later. But as long as you water and those plants get 6 hours of sun, you're going to get veggies.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And Matthew, what do you think it'll take for people to get a vegetable garden started? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, first and foremost, that I know Ms. Spindler obviously has tens of thousands of more times of experience than I do. I'm only just a middle school gardening advocate, and I'm proud to say that I'm self-educated. I've just watched, YouTube tutorials and read articles on how to garden. But one of the things that I want to add on to Ms. Spindler's really great advice is I think in regards to the soil, in my experience gardening flowers and vegetables, soil is one of the things that you can invest in because it's really important to have great soil and great nutrients in your when you start gardening. And one of the things that I also really love doing is I have my backyard doesn't really have a very my backyard doesn't have a lot of land, and we can't really afford any like raised bed gardens in our backyard. So one of the things I really like doing is having felt pots, especially having felt pots that are really flexible and have really good water drainage. I feel like it's a great way to affordable way, especially in an urban environment like Los Angeles or places where a lot of my friends who I've been talking about gardening to really live in apartments and condos. They don't have that luxury of having a backyard. So if any of you guys live in those kinds of conditions, one of the great ways I think would be to have felt pots.
Awesome advice. Thank you. Absolutely. And so, as we're going on starting a vegetable garden, so we've started, what are our best practices? What are some tools that people need to be aware of as they adventure into this? Because I'll tell you, for me, it was a learning experience. I think it's been 2 years since I've been trying. And every time I try, I seem to burn the plants or they just die out. And I was known in my family as someone that, is a plant killer. So do not want people to get, upset about being that way. I was that way too. And lo and behold, 2 years later, we've got a garden. So what are some of the best practices that you can share with everyone?
Sure. As Matthew said, the key really is choosing the appropriate container. If you don't have in-ground soil that you can work with, the key is choosing the appropriate container. And the felt bags, or they're also called grow bags that he's talking about, are awesome because they do drain well. If you are choosing any kind of container, you have to make sure that it has the ability to drain. So if it's a pot, you need to make sure it has a drain hole. The other thing that I think Matthew probably has noticed with the grow bags is they are of an adequate size to hold a plant. When I started, gardening as a child, I tried growing herbs in, very small, 4-inch in diameter pots, and they never did very well because there wasn't enough soil and therefore not enough nutrients and enough medium to hold water. So I always like to tell folks, choose a container that you can hug. So put your arms out big and, see if you can hug that container. And that will basically be a 14 to 18-inch container. And then you want to fill it with a good potting mix. And then of course, plant your plants. And the key truly is to make sure they have adequate sun, which is tough. And I'm sure Matthew in his small yard, had to look around and find the spots that had the best sunlight. So that's the first good practice, is to choose the right size container. And again, to Matthew's point about being affordable, one of the things that you can do that's super affordable and maybe not the most attractive, but if you don't care because it's just you looking at it, you can get those orange Home Depot buckets and drill holes in the bottom of them. And those are fabulous to grow plants. I once was doing some videos for Home Depot, and they had a young woman who gardened solely on the roof of her Brooklyn apartment, and she gardened solely in Home Depot pots, and she grew more on her rooftop garden than I was growing in my raised bed garden. So that can be a very effective and inexpensive way to get started.
That's awesome. Matthew, what do you think are some of your best practices?
Yeah. First of all, adding on to how you said that all your plants die. My mom and myself especially always known for in my family to kill all our plants, especially all the vegetables, all the fruits. And some of the most reliable plants we now plant is only succulents because they're very easy to water. But I'm not. I don't have a green thumb either. But one of the great ways to start a vegetable garden, adding on to what Miss Spindler said, is to have great drainage. I've had experience in the past where my pot or my container didn't have drainage holes, and there's like root fungus. The soil smelled like really funky, and I was doing a science fair experiment on the growth of plants as well, and I had these containers which I was gonna add potting soil and grow these lima beans, and my mom looked at them and she found that there wasn't any drainage, so that saved me a couple weeks from trial and error. But drainage holes are really important, and one of the other things that I would recommend in to start a vegetable garden is adding on to what Miss Spindler said again. For the felt pots, what's really important is that you get enough sunlight. And one of the things I love with modal containers like pots and felt pots is that you can move them around where there's sun and where there's no sun. How one of the tips I received on while watching YouTube videos when starting out was that when you have felt pots or containers, you can place them wherever you want, wherever the sun is getting them, whatever place is getting the most sunlight, and that's something that I've really kept in mind, and that's something that really helped my plants and vegetables grow.
Awesome advice. And in one of our comments, I see Sorrel said, I could kill a cactus, but I have a wonderful, beautiful garden now. So Sorrel, just before we got on, I was sharing with them how bad I am with plants, that I actually had a cactus in my office that I basically killed. So, I'm there too. So there's a lot of people out there that feel that, they're not good at planting or gardening, but I think it just takes that time to kind of understand, because there's so many different dynamics when you're planting. Like when I planted my squash and my zucchini, they weren't producing vegetables. And so I had put it on Facebook, oh, I don't know why mine aren't producing vegetables. And everyone else seems to be putting pictures up about all their zucchinis and squashes coming in. And then I found out that, you have the male and female sexes of the plants, and they have to be there as well in order to pollinate. And that was a learning experience. I was like, I had no idea we had to do that. So Tina, do you want to talk about the importance of having, how do you make sure that you're going to have a vegetable garden that's actually going to produce vegetables?
Sure. So the problem you're talking about is pollination, which is particular to zucchini and other squash plants and other plants in general, but not every plant. Some plants have male and female flowers. And just like humans, you need the flower, which is the female part, the female flower, to be pollinated by the pollen which develops in the male flower. If that isn't happening naturally, you actually can do it yourself. You can recognize the male zucchini flower or squash flower because it's just on a skinny straight stem, whereas the female flower is not on that skinny straight stem. And you can actually just take like a paintbrush and touch the inside of the flower of the male flower and put it over on the inside of the female flower. An easier way to do that in general for vegetable gardens is to make sure that you plant plants in your vegetable garden or your pots that attract bees and butterflies. So for instance, having some lavender, having some basil and letting it flower, having some sage, many of the herbs which flower are, if you have them in your own yard, rosemary, whatever, you'll notice that those are covered with bees. And my kids, when they were little, hated when I planted basil because it attracted a lot of bees and they were afraid of the bees. But you do that near your veggie garden or in your veggie garden so that you always have those bees available for pollinating your plants so that you end up getting fruit. Now, some of your veggies, of course, don't need pollination because we don't eat the fruit of those plants. So for instance, any of the leafy greens, we don't care about those getting pollinated because we're going to eat them before they produce flowers. Once they produce flowers, we don't want to eat the lettuce anymore. So it depends on what kind of plant you have planted, whether you're going to eat the fruit or the green part. But in any event, it's just good practice to plant flowers and plants that attract bees just for the general environment also, so that we have good pollination going on just in general.
That's some great advice. Matthew?
Yeah, I think Miss Fiddler covered all bases on the pollination section. One thing that I wanted to add about drainage is that I saw a lot of when people start out, I think a lot of the great ways to succeed with container gardening is to have either a coffee filter or gravel underneath your soil, because I think that's also a great way to get out the excess water to stop overwatering. But apart from that, one of the other great things that I've been looking into recently was composting. I think that's also a really great way to a really natural way, first of all, to get nutrients and get all those microbial organisms into your garden. And I think it's also ties into sustainability, because especially we have a lot of food waste going out, a lot of scraps, and I think if you just put that into your compost tumbler or your hot composting bin, I think that's also a really great way to gain soil and gain a lot of great nutrients that you can add to help your garden and help your vegetables.
Awesome, wonderful. So while we're talking about best practices, maybe we can go over some of the seasonal timings that you want to plant these vegetables. So
Sure.
I'd love to hear, what's in right now for this season and what can we expect for the fall?
Sure. In California, Southern California, we are blessed because we have a climate that allows us to garden year round. So unlike the Midwest and back east, who basically only garden probably from May to October, we get to garden the whole year long. But what that means for us is that we have to identify what we should be planting during different times of the year. And right now, we're in the warm season. California only has 2 seasons if you're a gardener. Who knew? Not 4, only 2. We have a warm season and a cool season. And so the warm season lasts from about the middle of March until around the 1st of October. And then the cool season obviously lasts from October till the middle of March. What happens, as you know, is the days are hotter and longer in the warm season, and they're shorter, cooler, and wetter in the cool season. I think I said that backwards, but in the summer, of course, it's hot. The days are long, and we have to be super careful about watering. And in the cool season, we have to choose plants that don't need that heat and the long days to ripen. So, for instance, peppers and melons and squash need long, warm days in order to develop that fruit and ripen. And tomatoes, of course, too, everyone's favorite. In the winter time or the cool season, we switch to things that will do with less heat, shorter daylight hours. And that would be, if you think of anything leafy, so lettuce, spinach, kale, anything leafy, anything that's a root. So for instance, radishes, carrots, beets, those things. And then anything that's in the family of what's called the cole crops, which is vegetables such as broccoli, cauliflower, cabbages, any of those. So those are good for the upcoming cool season. So when do we plant all of those things? Well, actually, kind of counterintuitive, but if you're going to start, say, broccoli and cauliflower from seed, you want to do that in August in little 6-pack containers. And they will need to grow in those containers for 6 to 8 weeks. So if you add 6 to 8 weeks to now, where are you going to be? Close to October, right? So if you're going to start those things from seed, you actually want to do them now, which seems kind of crazy because it's, definitely the hot season. If you are not going to start them from seed, you don't need to start them now. If you want to plant and start your veggie garden right now while it's hot, if you do it in the next week or 2, you can still plant peppers, tomatoes, squashes, and green beans. But in order for those plants to have time to grow their fruit, I would start with plants that have already been started at the nursery. So in other words, go to the nursery, buy 4-inch pots of peppers and tomatoes, etc., and plant those in your garden, because it's going to take those plants, a good couple of months to actually give you fruit. And tomatoes are what's called a tender plant. And so as soon as we get cold weather, the tomato plant will poop out and not be giving you tomatoes anymore. So right now is a bit of a tricky time to decide what to plant. You have to decide if you're going to want to plant these warm season vegetables, which you definitely can, but do it soon in the next couple of weeks.
We had a question on the chat here, and it says, how much water do tomato plants need? My tomato plant's not producing fruit.
That's always a tricky question. We you know, as master gardener, we get, you know, how much water question a lot. And the trouble is you can't give a specific answer because it depends on the weather. And so if you're growing it in a container, what I like to tell people is to use their moisture meter, which is your finger, and to stick it in the soil about 2 inches down. If the top inch is dry, it's time to water. But if only the top ½ inch is dry, you don't need to water because the soil below that is moist. If it is in a pot that has good drainage, it's pretty hard to overwater because, as you know, when you water a pot, whatever excess water there is comes out the bottom. But if you are gardening in the ground, it is easy to overwater, especially where we live, because we mostly have clay soil, which stays really wet. In that case, go ahead and take a little trowel and dig down into the soil a bit. And again, just look and feel how wet it is. What I generally do is I water every other day in the summertime. But on the pots, I do check, particularly if we're pushing, you know, 90-degree weather, then in a pot you may need to water every day. In the winter, I water as often as, you know, twice a week, maybe only once a week. And if we've had rain, you don't have to water at all.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add there, Matthew?
Yeah, so what Ms. Spindler was saying about, you know, seasonal fruits and seasonal veggies, some of the things I've been growing, which I started in July, were marigolds. I heard they were really good during the summer, and they haven't bloomed yet, but something I'm looking forward to. Also, just to mention, one of the things I really love about gardening in general, and this ties into climate change and the environment as well, but it really helps, you know, save that extra trip to the grocery store. If you have, you know, your cilantro plant or you have your tomato plant outside in your backyard or in a pot, it really saves that, you know, car trip to, you know, Ralph's or your local grocery store, which also in turn helps the environment. But one of the things that I think I've been, or one of the things that I'm gonna start growing in the next couple of days are kale and cucumber. I also heard they're really great to plant in August. And I know my cousins have a cucumber plant in their backyard, and I visited them in Kansas recently, and it was also really inspiring to watch, and something that I want to start in California as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I know we talked about all the good stuff. So what are some of the don'ts in gardening? What should people not do when it comes to gardening?
Sure. I know I'm guilty of this because I always want to plant one more plant. So one of the don'ts is don't crowd. I would always try and, you know, put tomatoes, you know, so many together, you know, 1 foot apart. And, you know, tomatoes need to be 3 feet apart. There's just no getting around it. If you try to plant plants that get large too close together, you're going to be plagued with disease and pests because plants need good air circulation. And if you're crowding them, they're not going to get good air circulation. That's going to cause probably fungal diseases to occur. And whenever a plant is stressed, it attracts insects, bad insects. And so then you just have this spiral downward from disease and insect infestation. So number 1, don't plant too close together. Number 2, fertilize appropriately. Every package of fertilizer, whether it's organic or synthetic, comes with very specific instructions on the back. And there's usually a set of instructions for when you first plant and then for how you add while the growing season is going on. So do always follow the directions. So for instance, if it says 2 cups per 25 square feet, don't do 4 cups per 25 square feet. If it says after things have been planted, to do what's called side dressing. And here we're talking about granular fertilizer, not liquid fertilizer. If it says, 2 tablespoons per plant sprinkled around the plant, again, only use 2 tablespoons around each plant. And side dressing just means that you're not going to put it on top of the stem. You're going to put it under the canopy of the leaves along the side of the plant, because that's where the feeder roots are located, is out a bit away from the stem. And then you want to just lightly scratch it in, but you don't want to dig it in, because when the plant is already growing, you could disturb the roots and end up killing your plant. So fertilize properly following the instructions. Do be diligent about watering regularly and paying attention to how moist the soil is. Because of COVID, we're not taking a lot of vacations, so it may not be as big of an issue this year. But I know in past years, for me, if I haven't gotten someone to come, water the garden for me, when I came back, I would have, some plants that perhaps were too far gone to revive. So do pay attention to the watering. And then the last thing is to pay attention and be your own best inspector in the garden. It's a good idea for your mental health and also for the plant health to go out in your garden every day. And one of the reasons for that is if there is a pest infestation, you're getting eaten alive by snails or aphids, or there's powdery mildew, which is a fungal disease, you're going to spot it early, and then you can treat it early. And if you don't know what to do, as Matthew does, just Google it. Or because I'm a University of California Master Gardener, you can also go to the University of California Master Gardener website. What's cool about that is if you have a specific question that you haven't found a satisfactory answer to, there is a ability to send the question in, and you'll get your own personal response from a Master Gardener.
That's awesome. Thank you. Matthew, some of the don'ts.
Yeah, first of all, in regards to what Ms. Spindler said, I've actually seen the Master Gardener hotline, and I've been really tempted to, email and see if I get a response back, but unfortunately I haven't yet. And also, in addition to what she was saying about, COVID and taking vacations, I've had a really nightmarish situation where I planted, I think it was some kind of flower in a pot, and I went on a trip to Yosemite National Park. And when I came back, it was all dead. But it was too late to come back. But so that's just one of the things. And some of the don'ts. When I was starting off planting a lot of veggies and a lot of fruits, one of the tips I've gotten was research your plant very well, because there's different conditions and different correct environments for what is the best suitable environment for your plant. And some of the things is there's certain species of plants, like certain tomato plants or certain other types of plants, that just don't work well when they're close to each other. And so you should always research your plant and make sure there's not any other plants being toxic to each other's growth. And that's one of the things I've learned. Also, in regards to composting, I think especially when you're starting out, and when you're starting out, you should definitely use this is more of the do's, but you should use a compost tumbler, but make sure that since I was a beginner a couple months, a couple weeks ago, one thing that I'm definitely not going to do next time, and what I'm going to advise to aspiring gardeners, is to don't use eggshells, especially when you're just starting out, because eggshells, I realized, eventually you get that really rich black soil, but there's still eggshell bits at the top for some reason, which I still haven't really figured out the answer to. But that's just something to keep in mind when you're starting out with composting.
Very good to know. Now, I know we talked a little bit about fertilizers, and it was funny because a friend of mine I was talking to today, was mentioning the town hall tonight. And he's like, I know I'm not going to be able to join, but I grew up on a farm. And he was like, the best fertilizer is chicken manure. And I'm like, where do you get chicken manure from? So maybe you guys want to talk about what are some of the best fertilizers to use in organic versus non-organic.
Sure. So the three main nutrients that plants want to grow, and you'll see on the label of every fertilizer bag, there'll be three numbers. And the first one is the percentage of nitrogen. The second one is the percentage of phosphorus. And the last one's the percentage of potassium. And we won't get scientific. Matthew probably can get scientific on us, but basically you need those three nutrients. And whether it comes in an organic form or a synthetic form, the plant will use it either way. And one of the reasons that chicken manure is a pretty good fertilizer is that it is relatively high in nitrogen, and nitrogen's that element that causes green growth. The middle number is the phosphorus, and that encourages fruiting and flowering. And then the last one, the potassium, encourages root development and general overall plant health. So the bottom line is whether you choose organic or synthetic is a personal choice. If you want to know that your vegetables and or flowers have been grown organically, then you will choose a fertilizer that is labeled organic. But your plants will grow with either. One of the things to note is that organic fertilizers are less strong than synthetic fertilizers, and they also work better when the soil is warm. So if you're using an organic fertilizer in the summer and you have been just thrilled with it and you've had great results, but then you use it in the winter and you're kind of disappointed, that could be one of the reasons. So just be aware that the organic fertilizers are not as strong. And for that reason, you don't burn what's called, Farah, you mentioned you had burned some plants at one point. It could have been if you were using a synthetic fertilizer that is stronger, if you didn't follow the package directions exactly, it's easy to burn your plants with a synthetic fertilizer. As far as using chicken manure, the chicken manure that you buy in bags has already been composted. Matthew talked about composting, and I'm so excited that you're composting because not very many people do. And composting is awesome and amazing, but it does take a little bit of time and work. And I have a friend who has chickens, so I get raw chicken manure, which you never want to put directly in your veggie bed because it can, because it's so new and raw, burn your plants. And also you don't want to have any pathogens, in fresh manure right directly up against your veggies. So if you have access to chicken manure that is raw, please compost it first, or alternatively buy composted chicken manure in bags. And that will be, great for your garden. But the really benefit of compost is that it isn't necessarily a fertilizer, but it is going to really increase a lot of the positive properties of your soil. For instance, it's made out of organic matter. So what do we put in compost? We put leaves, we can put eggshells, we put everything, but we don't put meat. We never put any kind of meat waste in compost. And when that heats up naturally and decomposes by volume about 2/3, what's left is just this crumbly, sweet smelling, looks like soil, but it's not. It's basically decomposed organic matter. And what it does is it puts organic matter back into the soil, and that enriches the soil by providing the beneficial organisms, because there's all kinds of organisms in soil. We know about earthworms because we can see them with our eyes, right? But there's a lot of stuff that's too small for us to see with our eyes. But when we put the compost in, it adds those beneficial organisms, and it adds food for beneficial organisms into the soil, because your soil is a living thing. It's not dead. It's a living thing. And so we want to encourage it to have the best life, rich life possible. Matthew, what do you have to add about compost and fertilizer?
Yeah, first I just want to mention, in regards to fertilizer, I haven't had much experience with that. But one of the things that I was really tempted to do is, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with it. I've had this in my household for a while. It's plant food from Miracle Grow. It's this brand. I'm not sure if you guys have any experience with it, but sometimes when my vegetables aren't growing, I'm very tempted to use that over, like mix it in with water and spray over my plants. But one thing I realized is, first of all, I feel like sometimes it gets chemical burns, the plant. I'm not sure if you guys have any experience with that, but also a little goes a long way. And I think just adding a little bit really helped the growth of my veggies, even though it's a synthetic material. I think that now I'm trying to branch out because I have a little bit more experience. I'm trying to branch out to composting, and also about the chicken manure. I visited the Farm and Food Lab a couple weeks ago, and I was really excited to see, or a couple months ago, I think. My cousins were visiting from Kansas, and I showed them the Farm and Food Lab, and I saw all the chickens in the little house over there, and it was really interesting to see because it's almost like a farm, but it's in Irvine, and definitely kudos to Miss Spindler and kudos to Councilmember Khan. And in regards to composting, yeah, I think it's also a really great way to add the organic material, as you mentioned earlier, back into the soil. My soil especially gets really, really dry, and I stick my finger in, and it's like chalk almost sometimes. And one of the great things about composting I love is that all that organic material, it's so much more richer and so much more moist than my normal soil. And if I just add that, my plants and veggies also grow really well. And yeah, and uh, composting is a great idea, and I would recommend it for everyone.
That's
I'll
awesome.
just add a little bit, if I may, about the liquid fertilizer. Miracle Grow is one brand of a liquid synthetic fertilizer, and I worked with Scott's Miracle Grow actually through our connection at the Farm and Food Lab. They were a wonderful sponsor of the Farm and Food Lab the first couple of years that it existed. And they have both synthetic and organic products, but I think the liquid Miracle Grow that Matthew was referring to is a synthetic fertilizer, and he's absolutely right. When you use it properly, you will see a definite, quick result. That's one of the benefits of liquid fertilizers, is that they're immediately available to the roots of the plant, and also the leaves actually absorb it, and so that's called foliar feeding when you spray a liquid fertilizer on a plant. So yes, those liquid synthetic fertilizers can increase your plant's growth. One of the things that you do need to be careful, again, is that the strength can be pretty damaging if you aren't careful. And the other thing you have to remember is if you use it frequently, it can affect those microorganisms that are in the soil because it's not a natural substance. It can perhaps limit their activity and their presence in your soil, which is one reason why using compost and other organic products is considered better by some, because then the soil health is better.
Awesome. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to Q&A. And so I know I saw a couple questions on here. So everyone, if you could comment your questions in that section there, we'll be very happy to answer them. And let's see, there's a question by Lena Palmer. Does Irvine have a botanical garden? Not yet, but we're working on it. So one of the components of the Great Park that we've been trying to work on for the longest time, and I know Tina has been a great supporter of, and actually is one of the founders of the Great Park Garden Coalition, the Botanical Garden and Garden Coalition. Am I saying that title right?
Yes, it's Great Park Garden Coalition is the name of the nonprofit.
Yes. And so we are working hard to bring a botanical garden into the Great Park. And so very excited about that opportunity. So definitely want to get that there, not there yet, but we're working on it. And if you're interested, please join the Great Park Garden Coalition. They have a Facebook page as well.
We do.
And so if that's your interest, please join them and help support this initiative. It's great.
Yes, we have both a web page, a Facebook page, and an Instagram page. The web page has some great gardening articles and information on it. And that web page is gpgardencoalition.org. And then you can just type in Facebook or Instagram, Great Park Garden Coalition, and that will bring you to our page on those areas. And we just try to give people gardening information that's seasonal, post pictures that are inspirational, and just get people excited about what is ahead of us. And Farah has been amazing. Before she was a council person, she has supported our group and helped us learn about how to do Facebook pages and that sort of thing. So I can't thank her enough for being our steadfast supporter and helping us wind our way through the process at the city.
That's awesome. I'm really excited about that.
Mhm.
And then let's see, Sylvia says, I've always used organic fertilizer and it has worked fine. Yeah, I think that's one of the best things that you can use. Again, it's just about learning how to use these different components of gardening, whether it's fertilizers or extra nutrients or compost. Just to take a little time and learn how to do it. Don't be like me. Don't just jump into it and plant stuff and expect miracles to happen. That's not how it works. So Sylvia, I think we have another question from Sylvia. It says, can we have more community gardens that are open to all Irvine residents? Yes, that would be exciting. That's something Matthew has been working on. Matthew,
Yeah.
can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I would just like to mention a bit about like where I got this inspiration from. I in sixth grade, I had this climate change assembly where a nonprofit organization, came up to us and gave a presentation about climate change. And so, first of all, I tried to make. I was really shocked by this news and this information, and so I wanted to do something about it. And so I started, first of all, setting up, announcements on my school's intercom, where they had morning announcements. I tried my best to incorporate fun facts into the announcements about climate change and about gardening. And I was reading this New York Times article one day, and it said, the a great way to build community and friendship among your neighbors, and also a great way to combat climate change and learn more about plant-based foods and plants in general is to create a community garden. And one of the things I loved about community gardens immediately was the fact that they're all about building community and about building relationships with fellow environmentalists and fellow gardeners. And also, a really great way to combat climate change is to grow more plants and to plant more seeds so that the plants will absorb all the carbon dioxide out of the environment. And so I contacted Councilmember Khan, and I contacted I CC'd our city mayor, but Councilmember Khan was super receptive, which she's super receptive to all really great ideas about the environment, and which I can't thank you enough again, and which is a reason why I'm really a strong supporter of you for mayor. And together we had a couple meetings. We started before COVID hit, and we've had a meeting during this pandemic as well about how we can incorporate community gardens in Irvine. And one of the things that we're looking to do is building community gardens close to, I think you mentioned, Councilmember Khan, close to the Portola Hills, Orchard Hills area. And that's one of our objectives in, first of all, creating more community gardens for especially Irvine residents and Orange County residents, visit and talk to each other and hopefully learn something about the gardening, and hopefully they're inspired every time they come to maybe Ms. Spindler's Great Park Garden Coalition at the Farm and Food Lab, and hopefully as Councilmember Khan and I work together towards building more community gardens in Irvine. I think our main goal is to increase awareness about the environment and especially educate future generations and people who are interested in gardening and in combating climate change to find more and implement more sustainable practices in their lives. And especially what we're talking about with the composting and just growing your own veggies from home. I think I really hope, and working together with you two really fabulous people, I really hope to inspire other people, and I hope community gardens that we work together to build really helps spread awareness among our community.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. And this is something that I hope that we continue working on. And really, there's a lot of interest from the community on this. But we're going to go on to our next question.
If I could add just one thing real quickly, Farah, I just wanted to let both you and Matthew know that you have a huge resource to use in that effort, and that is the University of California Master Gardeners. We help with community gardens all over the county. And so when you identify a site and you want some information, if you want talks, if you want a master gardener to be assigned to your project, please let me know, because we can make that happen.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I wanted to add before this question ends is I don't have much gardening experience myself, not especially in the professional education that Miss Spindler does. But one of the things that I was talking to her about this morning was, the possibility about becoming a master gardener. I really think that I don't have much experience and I'm not that credible as she is. And I hope there's not an age limit, but one of the things that I'm really looking into is, gaining more experience in creating vegetable gardens and, creating plants from at home. And that's one of the things that I'm really looking into now. And one of the things that is on my bucket list.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Matthew. And then let's see, Sorel says, I'm an aeroponic gardener. It's great because I don't have a yard. And that's really amazing. I know one of the things, and there's another question here, can the area in front of the Civic Center be turned into a community garden? Well, some of the things that I've been working on with our environmental manager at the city was we actually went to UCI where they have those tall, right outside of their main cafe, they have these tall gardens that are in these cylindrical columns, and they're growing everything in there. And I know a friend of mine, Alicia, in Irvine, she does the same thing in her backyard. She has these tall cylinders where she grows her lettuce, she grows her vegetables, and they're a great resource because if you don't have space, you can always grow them up ways. But so many different opportunities out there for people that are interested in there and get creative with gardening.
Yeah.
So let's see here. And we have a lot of clay in our backyard, but we want to plant fruit trees. How do we plant a fruit tree in that clay so it doesn't die?
So the one of the main things that you need to do is to amend the soil. So you need to dig a big hole, and so it's a little bit of a backbreaking chore, but you want to dig a hole that it is at least twice as wide as the container that the plant is coming in, and only as deep as the container. You don't want to dig a deep hole, you want to dig a wide hole. And the reason for that is if you dig a deep hole, one of the things that causes fruit trees to fail is it will, as you put the soil back in, what will happen to that soil is it will settle and then the fruit tree will sink. And as a result, it will get too much water, and then you will have a problem with the roots becoming waterlogged and all, potentially fungal diseases, etc. So make sure that you dig your hole twice as wide as the container that the tree comes in, and then amend that soil, which just means mix into that soil a bag of store-bought compost if you're not making your own, or it's often called garden soil, but when it's labeled garden soil, what it is it's actually compost. So mix that in with your native soil and then backfill that hole. But make sure that you're not planting that tree too deeply because you don't want it to be, drowned with too much water. And at the time of planting, also add, per the instructions on the fertilizer box, some, plant food. so that your tree has some nutrients. And again, make sure that it gets at least 6 hours of sun, because a fruit tree will want at least 6 hours of sun.
And if I could add to the previous question about the gardens that you mentioned at UCI, I visited UCI. There's this gardening club, I think, a gardening section at the University of California, Irvine, which I was really interested in because they had aquaponics. And it was really interesting to see, the really, really sustainable nature of, having that really great nutrients from the water and coming into planting these plants. And also talking about really creative ways to garden. One of the things that I found really interesting is vertical gardens. I saw that they had, if like different shoe holders, and they slit holes in the bags to allow for drainage, and that is much more. It's much less space, and it's a way that you can grow a lot of different plants in a small amount of space. And for gardening in general, I just wanted to mention that there's really no excuse not to do it. For me, I'm the type of person who's a really lazy gardener. I don't really like to go out and water my plants a lot. But one of the things that I was researching about recently was that there's so many ways that you can do indoor gardening too, to get rid of all the pests and all the nuances that you don't like when you go outdoors. And one of the great things that I was looking into are growing succulents, growing plants from like a soda can, or growing like I said, the vertical gardens. And there's so many different options, which is what I really love about gardening. And there's so many different ways you can get creative. You can have plants hanging from the ceiling. There's so many different ways you can do it, and yeah, it's really cool.
That is amazing. Thanks so much for sharing. I know we're running out of time. If there are any more questions out there, please send them our way in the comments, and we'll be sure to get those answered. But in the meantime, as we're wrapping up, Tina, anything else that you'd like to add that we didn't discuss today?
Sure. Because we mentioned starting plants from seed, I'd just like to briefly go over how to be successful when you start plants from seed. And the main thing is to buy fresh seeds. So on every seed packet, there's an expiration date, just like when you buy milk. So make sure you have a seed packet that has an expiration date that's past today. And when you plant them, the main thing, whether you're planting them in small 6-pack containers to start them before you plant out in the garden, or even if you're planting directly out in the garden, which we call direct sowing, where it's going to grow. The main thing that you need to remember with starting seeds is you cannot let them dry out. If they dry out, they are biologically programmed not to germinate. So when you do plant seeds, make sure that you keep them moist until you see them germinate. Then you can, not water them every day. But when we have a hot day, if you're starting some new seeds, you don't want to put them in, if you're starting them in containers, a great place to start them is on your patio, where you have a patio cover, so that they are getting some light, but they're not getting, beat on by the sun. And if we get Santa Ana winds, sometimes you have to water those seeds twice a day, because you don't want them to dry out. If you're planting them directly in the ground, they don't dry out quite as quickly, because as you know, when you plant things in the ground, the whole surrounding soil is moist, so it stays moist a little bit longer. But again, one word to the wise, and that is just make sure that you keep those seeds moist, and that will give you a much better success rate in them germinating.
That is a great point, because I will tell you, I've been gifted seed packets that I've had maybe for, I don't know, 5-6 years, and then I'll plant them and nothing will plant, and I wonder what happened.
That's why you actually, if you stored the seeds properly in a cool, dark place, then they may last for several years. Different seeds have different lives. But for new gardeners, I just suggest, because a seed packet is only $2 or $3, I just suggest, so that you're successful, because I want you to be successful on your first try. Just buy a fresh packet of seeds when you're a new gardener. And then as you become more experienced, then maybe you can try those older seeds, because you won't get quite so discouraged.
Adding on to the germination process, I had this science fair project where I tested, the growth of lima beans. And what I did is I just put the lima beans in the soil, but nothing really happened for a while. And I was like, what's wrong with my plant, right? And then what I was researching about is that you have to let the lima bean germinate, right? So what I did is I put them on a plate with a wet piece of paper towel, and I just gave it 2 to 3 days, and I saw the seeds starting to sprout, and I was like, wow, I'm actually making progress here. And in general, one of the tips that I would say that you should take out of this great town hall is to definitely invest a lot in your soil. Like Ms. Spindler mentioned earlier, you should always go for potting soil if you are doing container gardening rather than gardening soil, because gardening soil is very misleading. It's actually a different kind of compound. But additionally, one of the things that I do when I have potted plants is I always water every other day. I feel like if you don't really know a lot about your specific plant and you don't know about what their conditions are like, I think just the rule of thumb for me that I've learned over my experience is to water every other day. Or if you really don't know, just stick your finger in and test the environment. Um, Relating to figuring out the correct conditions for your plant, another great way to make sure that you're making sure everything is right for the plant that you are growing is to research a lot about your plant. There's some conditions that they don't like. Some people like drier soil. Some plants, sorry, not people. Some plants like moist soil. And I think that's also a really great tip for people who are just starting out, like I am. And lastly, I think gardening is just a really great way to meet other really passionate environmentalists. And I think through this town hall and through the similar passion of similar interest of gardening, I've met Miss Spindler, which is also a really great, who's also a really great mentor and a really great person to get advice from. And I think just talking and learning more about the environment and connecting with other people passionate about the same things is something that it really what makes me interested in continuing to do this today.
That's awesome. And on that note, we also had Sylvia who asked about an Irvine Garden Club where we could exchange information. So I don't know, Matthew, Tina, if you guys want to start something on social media, that's an Irvine Garden Club that people can join in and share their experiences, ask questions, and I'll be there with my squash and zucchini. So
Actually, I think that so that we have an immediate start, what I would suggest is go to Facebook's and just put in Great Park Garden Coalition and post your questions right there. We really want that to just be a community of garden lovers. And yes, eventually we will get to have our botanic garden where we will have amazing classes and maybe even a community garden. But in the meantime, let's just use that as a community. And I will also tell you what, I will on our website, our gpgardencoalition.com, I will post as a result of today's town hall, some University of California Master Gardener handouts on starting and seeds, on starting veggie gardens, on soil, and we have a great schedule of when to plant which plants, what months of the year. So since those already exist, that website, Facebook page, and Instagram, I will go ahead and post that information on the GP Garden Coalition website, and folks can directly message me on the Facebook page, or honestly, you can message me at my GP Garden Coalition email, which is just my name, Tina, Teena, gpgardencoalition@gmail.com. I know that's long, but send me any question you like. And as Matthew already mentioned, on the Master Gardener website, there is a hotline that you can also post questions on. I won't be the one personally who answers, but there will be a Master Gardener who answers your question.
that's awesome. I just added the website on the chat group right there, so everyone has it.
Great.
And on Facebook, it's how is it listed on Facebook? Is it just Great Park Garden Coalition?
Gosh, that's a good question. I
Put that
think it's just Great Park Garden Coalition. I mean, I use it all the time, but I just don't actually look at the, pretty silly. There's also, if you go to our webpage, though, there's a direct link to the Facebook page on the webpage.
Oh, okay, perfect. So if you guys go to the website that the link that I put up in the comments, you can go to the Facebook page and definitely start, talking about gardening topics. And even I know someone had mentioned here, Amanda, I would love an Irvine plant exchange. What a fun idea! That would be a lot of fun to do.
It would be really fun. Master gardeners do a master gardener plant exchange once a year before COVID. And it is really, really fun. You need to have a place to do it that's pretty big, big parking lot or something, and an orderly way for people to, come in and exchange plants. But it is a great deal of fun.
Answering the two previous questions, sorry to interrupt. First of all, to Sylvia's question about Irvine having a gardening club, I was actually thinking about that over the past few weeks. But now that Miss Spindler has mentioned her Great Park Garden Coalition, definitely everyone should check that out. And in regards to Amanda's question, which was to have a plant exchange, originally before COVID hit, I think that was one of the things that I was planning to share with Councilmember Khan about, when we do have our community gardens, one of the things that I would really like to do is have a plant exchange where people can come together, really great gardeners can come together and exchange plants. One of the things that I saw in the news that I really, really resonated with is one of the people at Duke University is having a plant exchange and selling plants for the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think is really inspiring because she's also a really prolific gardener and and she's supporting a social cause that she really is passionate about. And another idea that I wanted to mention that I was going to try to implement in the community garden before COVID hit was having reaping the fruits and vegetables that we produce through the either the Farm and Food Lab or the community gardens that we're planning to build. And I'm not sure if this is possible, but maybe putting them in some kind of farmers markets. My target audience for the community garden was the younger generation, because I felt like they were the ones who might have, especially my peers, they might have, they might have to deal with the implications of climate change, and I just want to educate them on the fact that on what's happening in this world. And one of the ideas that I had about the farmers market was, having kids host it and having it being a student-driven, farmers market, so that they gain experience in connecting with other gardeners, and they also gain experience by having that local produce and that sustainable feeling of I'm doing something good for the environment. And I think that's really powerful for all ages of people.
Absolutely. And once we get that started, Matthew, I think that's a fantastic idea to have students that actually grow to be out in the farmers market sharing their produce. So again, folks, sorry, the first link I think I put on the website was incorrect. The right one is there. We also have the link to the Facebook page. And I know someone was questioning how often do you post in that group? So Tina, I think now we have a lot of interested people that are going to be going there. So we'll start posting a lot more. And
we'll post much more frequently with folks who are interested. As many things with COVID, our posts had slowed down. We're still posting about 2 articles a month. But given this group's interest in vegetable gardening, I'll be sure that we're posting, some information very frequently so that folks can have access to that.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And now we are out of time. Again, thank you to my guests. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Matthew, for being here tonight and sharing such great information. And thank you, everyone that joined in. Again, we're going to be recording this video and it'll be on my Facebook page for those that missed it tonight. Or if you want to go back and kind of rehear some of the information that was presented, it'll be available to you. Hope you guys have a wonderful night. Take care. Be safe.
Thank you.